All right.
Good. All right, here we go. Well, Spencer, once again, thanks for joining me today, man.
My pleasure. Good to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, man, this is for everybody watching or listening, as these always are. These are totally unscripted, but we maybe chatted for 30 seconds before we start recording here. So we're gonna dive right in. You sent me a lot of interesting stuff. I requested like a couple of bullet points from you, a little bit about your fitness journey and whatnot. And man, maybe we should start with at the bottom of the email under your name, you said that you attended the level one class in December of 2010 in Reston, Virginia, with myself, John Gilson, and Maggie as well. And so, 15 years ago. What in the world?
Yeah.
I mean, CrossFit right now, if you stopped 100 people in the grocery store, I don't know how many would really know about it. But in 2010, not a lot. So what got you in
Yeah.
there?
Um, well, I was a runner for a long time, not because I was good at it, but just because it wasn't hard to figure out. It was independent. This was back when you had a metal strap over your head to have headphones, so you just put your Walkman, chunky Walkman on a belt and then go run.
Dude, I remember having the yellow Sony with like the athletic one that had the hand strap and the little earbud things.
Yeah, and so it just became a habit. But it was one of those habits where, though I was doing it very diligently, I had no evidence that it was working. My body
Okay.
composition remained unchanged. I was injured all the time. I wasn't getting faster. And so what I mastered was just being really good at being really bored for really long periods of time.
You became dedicated. I mean, you're
Yeah, yeah.
consistently doing it.
And I was in the Navy, had a bunch of different duty stations.
I
One
was
of
going
them
to say
was
you strike
SD,
me as a military guy.
yeah, one of them was SDV Team One in Hawaii. And
Okay.
one of the luxuries of that is swim, run, PT, and then some sort of grind or calisthenics. So I mean, I had a basic level of fitness, but it was one of those things where it didn't seem like it was serving me. I did not
Mhm.
look in the mirror and see somebody who's fit. I just saw somebody who had a naturally leanish body composition with a nice dad pudge and an inability to do anything explosive. And I was sort of having this intuitive sense. So a couple duty stations later, I went to the library, well, not to the library, the Barnes and Noble,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
got a pen and paper out, and I was going to figure out fitness. And if you went to Barnes and Noble in that era, there'd be 6 books by Arnold Schwarzenegger and 20 books by people who ran and nothing
Hmm.
in the middle. But I had this idea like, well, but like what do humans do? They run, they punch, they kick, they crawl, they climb, they drag things. And so I did my best to kind of conceptualize something. But had no higher vision of any of it. And and I was also a cyclist. So I saw a picture of Lance Armstrong with a kettlebell in his hand. And my first thought was, what did he like raid the gym in an ancient Russian castle? Like,
Right.
what is he even doing? Like, actually, it was a little bit of contempt. Like, well, that's stupid. That doesn't make you go faster. And little by little, I at least kind of figured out, okay, I probably need to be doing pull-ups. I probably need to be, get a yoga mat and go back to doing sit-ups and crunches and leg levers and push-ups. Going back to calisthenics, just kind of Navy stuff. But I met a senior chief at work one day and we were just PTing outside together and he was doing stuff around the track with pull-ups mixed in. And I was like, well, that's complicated compared to,
Do you
what
remember where were you stationed then? What was the duty station there?
Patuxent River in Maryland, it's a naval air station.
Okay.
Yeah, not exactly a heavy hitter base. There's nothing there but test pilots and
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Okay.
office people. But it was a beautiful environment. I mean, the base is a 13-mile loop around the runways. So if you want to run,
There you
but
go.
one day at work, and such total misuse of government data systems, he sent me the "What is Fitness" article, from the CrossFit site. Such a wonderfully primitive website.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe got like a one-liner about what they did today. What was that in Santa Cruz? What they did
Yep.
today, kind of almost like a little bit of celebrity. Hey, Ava and Sean and Steve and Joe but the articles, it finally I had answers for so many things that I just wasn't having any luck figuring out on my own. Okay, cardiovascular fitness is neat.
And that one
Bodybuilding is
fitness
neato.
article is a
But
gem.
yeah, and so I think I broke three printers at Navair, deciding that I was going to binderize all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and I just became, not just a zealot, but one of those horrible evangelists too, that is determined to tell everybody. And so we started bringing sandbags and ropes to the track with us. Now we were random, not varied.
Mm-hmm.
We had
Okay.
absolutely
Okay.
no higher understanding of programming, but we just got after it in a way that, frankly, part of it was it felt playful too, and that's what was just
And I bet it
really.
worked.
Oh, it. I remember my first handstand walk, and it was after falling down in the grass for about an hour. But the workout of the day was just something like accumulated 50 meters of, and I was just determined to get it one way or the other.
Right.
And
Right.
same thing with kipping pull-ups. I knew how to cheat a pull-up because we're all guilty, but I had no idea that they could string together.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
remember, I guess my strict pull-ups, if I had to guess and be honest, I might have been able to pull off seven.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those days where the workout of the day was pull-ups, and I was gonna figure it out come, heck or high water, and I think I strung together like 11 and was just like, what? But it was so much more fun. And I started to feel things that, I mean, my body just doesn't respond to bodybuilding type stuff. Or I'm just not good at it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it started to feel a little bit more about performance
Oh, sure. Yeah.
instead of chasing a certain kind of look,
Right.
but the aesthetic showed up anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without making that the major effort, it just sort of
Agreed.
turned into, I feel good, I'm excited.
Agreed. And then what made you actually sign up for the seminar in 2010?
Well, every zealot needs an identification card in their
Fair
wallet.
enough. A
So,
badge that you're in the
so,
club.
so I just went looking around for, hey, I hear that they do this thing that like turns you into one of them. And I signed up for it, and I almost had to embezzle the money from myself. Because I'm a parent at the time. We had just had our fifth child, and I was facing a 1-year deployment, and I ended up in Yemen for a year.
Okay. Yeah.
But I knew I was either going to get it done now or I wasn't going to get it done. So I took a weekend, drove to Reston, and uh, and just came out of it having gotten exactly what I wanted. I want to know enough for my own benefit, but there are other people who are figuring this out too, or maybe just heard about it on the internet who are starting
Mm-hmm.
to play with it. I want to at least be dangerously competent
Yeah.
enough to run a program. And so it was a great experience. Frankly, I think the fellowship and the connectedness have always been, having been, I mean, yeah, I was in the Navy, but I was still not really I didn't do teamwork as well as some other people. It was still
Mm.
independent exercise for me, even when you're surrounded by hundreds of people. But this felt connected in the way that I think probably other tribes and platoons and units feel, where I know something about you
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't talked, because
Right.
I saw the way you grinded through and showed courage. And at the end, yucking it up for everybody who's still suffering. That's just not frankly all that common outside of young athletic teams. You don't really get to see people suffer with a smile really, really
Mm-hmm.
all that often.
And it does build, I think this was attributed to a Marine. It's certainly not my words, but somebody asked, I believe this Marine, how you uh, build a team or something like that. And he said equal parts laughter and suffering. You get people to share some laughs together and you get them to suffer together. in a community setting, you're going to go ahead and build a team. And I was like, that's not too far off. That's a pretty good, and there's a lot of that that goes on when you jointly suffer with each other.
Yeah.
100%. So
Yes.
you were all in to say the least.
I was all in. I mean, I left there doing very, very disciplined zone diet with scales and containers. The
Bringing you right back, man. Yeah.
paleo thing was still kind of it was a mumbling. Like I think we recognized that there were better foods and worse foods.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a thing. So it was, I'm on deployment in Yemen, working out of a safe house, and I'm the only guy measuring eggs in the morning and skipping the sugar in the coffee and just being annoying, generally
Yes.
annoying.
Generally annoying is a great way to
Everybody
put it.
else has pancakes on Sunday and I don't.
Yep.
But one of the things, even on that deployment, one of the things I found is, again, I was random, not varied. There was no indication that I was progressing. I
Mm.
had stepped into like yellow belt level overall physical preparedness, but I just had an appetite to be stronger. I remember
Mhm.
the couple of the SF guys were playing around in the gym that we had in the basement, and I got a hold of I mean, I'd done plenty of deadlifts, but I'd never done a linear progression. And I for about a year straight, I failed under 315 and was just really, self-loathing, disappointed in myself. Well, it's not an adult lift until there's this many plates on the bar.
Mhm.
And so, oddly enough, I kind of flipped to, okay, that's what's important to me is more
Okay.
numbers.
Yep.
Again, not varied, but random
Yep.
and struggled mightily to just be stronger.
I think we've all gone through different phases in our journey where things capture your attention intensely for a while and then they fade and they come back, or your interests change. And it might all be in the whole sphere of physical culture, but you might be really into CrossFit for a while. Then it's all about kettlebells and you love powerlifting. Then you get back to running and then you circle back. Like, you know, some people are weird. People are very strange sometimes. That can like annoy people. Like if you drift away for a while, you're, how dare you? You're a hater. It's like, if you're out there moving your body and trying something, like people are allowed to have different phases and periods of their life for experimentation. If you actually allow yourself to experiment in these different areas, you're either going to find something else that you love more, or it's going to bring you back to where you should have been. Like it's all good.
Right.
I'm curious, and I don't know if we're jumping around here, but you've laid a really nice framework as to how passionately you were involved with CrossFit, how much it spoke to you. You were like all in, printing out the journals, going and getting your level one. And one of the bullet points that you wrote me was that at some point in time, in your words, you had some neurotic resentments that told you to quit CrossFit, and then something eventually brought you back. Is this the lifting phase that you're talking about, or when you said neurotic resentments that told you to quit CrossFit, is it
Um,
something else? Because you're
yeah,
all
yeah, well,
at this moment, you're all in.
complex neuroticism. So at my Dex and duty station, I just knew for a fact I wanted to get stronger. So for about 2 years, I did Wendler 531.
Okay,
I ended up, just under 400-pound deadlift,
well
bench, all
done.
that other stuff went pretty well. But I mean, it was at the cost, of course, of the other elements of fitness.
Sure.
But I was still eating like a zoner, which does tend to keep your body composition under control. So
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty
Oh
satisfied.
yeah. Say what you will
Um,
about the zone, but if you're actually doing it, it works.
yeah. Well, and the thing I love about it so much is just like so much of the rest of CrossFit. When you have data, you can tend to master around the edges. I mean, you can move the needle gigantically early on, but even in those little minute tweaks at the end, I used to joke with people that I have a lever. I
Yeah.
cannot gain 20 pounds, but I can lose and gain 10 pounds almost on
Yeah.
a whim because,
You've got precision.
yeah, the math is right here.
Yep.
So then this was also the time where the games is kind of a background noise.
Okay.
And I was both enthusiastic about it and troubled by it at the same time because some of the the other voice in my head that wants me to criticize everything said, okay, we're not really doing like an overall GPP because that wouldn't look cool on TV. And,
Right.
there was a time where you couldn't buy shoes, supplements, t-shirts, or assistance bands or rogue collars at a CrossFit gym. There was no commerciality to it. And I mean, I was a kind of a punk rock skateboard kid, so I liked the non-commerciality thing. And for some
Hmm.
reason, the games they just angered me. I'm sure it was jealousy. I'm sure it was just
Fair enough, man. I mean, I don't think, again, each person's view and perspective is based upon what their lived experience. And so two people could both do CrossFit for 10 years and have wildly different opinions of it, even though they both did it for 10 years. That makes
yeah,
perfect sense to me. And especially if you got in and maybe your personality really connected with something which at the time was kind of counterculture, kind of fringe or whatnot. And then as it
yeah,
becomes larger and bigger and potentially more commercialized and the media gets more polished, it makes sense that it might start to feel that it's less fringe and less out there and more mainstream. And then if you've got a certain inclination to, something fringe, I can see you're like, well, I'm not sure I like the direction this is going.
yeah, yeah. So it was that 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 perceived terminal uniqueness that I felt so uh, absolutely understood and connected to a tribe. The tribe grew up, and I had a problem with that, and
Hmm.
that was bothering me. I still remember Gilson talking about, what's good for you is good for grandma, just in a different degree. And I
Hmm.
still really, the
Right.
place I always fell in love with is the people who were in their first 6 months of CrossFit. Now, granted, many of them will drop out, but those are where the magic, if it came down to me with my little level one cert and a limited amount of experience, can I take somebody from a middle-aged dad just kind of getting his stuff together to a competitive games athlete? Absolutely not. I don't have the skill,
Hmm.
I don't have the interest, but I just still believed kind of in that first layer being so important. And I felt like, well, again, this is the story I was telling myself. That doesn't make it true. I'm able to make those distinctions sometimes. That the games would become a distraction to the core elements of general physical preparedness. So I convinced myself. Next thing was they came out with a level two cert. Then I had
Hmm.
that sense of like, oh, I'm not good enough anymore.
Yes,
Or
yes.
or this is a money grab, or all of those
Hmm.
things. Um, and so I just kind of stayed sour on it. I continued to do not varied, not random, but just bad self-programming. Anything I'm in charge of, if I don't get a second checker, it'll it'll
Right.
it'll go terribly. But sort of recently, I decided to just look at the CrossFit website. I wanted to see if there was any way I could just do like, what's the quickest way to maybe just renew my
Hmm.
certification? And there wasn't an easy answer. It was basically take the tests. Oh, by the way, the test costs the same as the 2-day course, so you may as well take the course. So I wrote an email to the headquarters, basically with a chip on my shoulder, ready to pounce and have an attitude and throw a tantrum that, hey, what are my options? And the person I got in touch with countered with, first of all, so much professionalism that I was sort of disarmed. Like half of my resentment was immediately dismissed because this is a nice person who seems to have loyalty to the brand, but also a loyalty to customers. She basically said, why don't we do this? We'll go ahead and validate your old, now long expired level one cert if you want to enroll in the level two. And then you're paying the same amount, but you're progressing. And I really thought to myself, I did not expect there would be an outcome better than I was asking for.
Mm.
And that just feels good. So I did that. I did the level two cert. And of course, just like if you get out of the hospital from an injury, you're not fixed. Well, what do I do now? Well, you go to rehab. You go start getting it together. So I had that same sensation leaving the cert. Well, now I gotta go find a tribe or actually implement this stuff. And I went to a couple of CrossFit gyms here, and they're terrific. I mean, they're running great, very basic programming. Most of them are running off either the main site or off of Mayhem. One gym was very, CrossFit Games oriented. The other one was more kind of mom and pop.
Mm-hmm.
But having been off Instagram also for about 10 years, I had an account just to look at fitness
God
stuff,
bless you. God
and
bless you. 10
Linchpin
years of
pops up.
Instagram.
There was videos of you, but I just thought, okay, some company called Linchpin is featuring Pat Sherwood. And there's just a general affinity with people that you recognize. I told you in the email that trust
Mm,
is maybe not important to everybody with a coach, but it is really the number one most important thing to me. But I thought you were just featured on some person's commercial website. You
gotcha.
clicked a couple things, looked through it, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is a program. Like this is like a real thing. And because I'm a garage gymmer, I just thought, I do love the tribe. I do love the community. I do love getting to work with other people. But to be perfectly honest, I'm very comfortable and I have no excuses if I don't leave the house and I just go downstairs and get it. So, there was some sort of semi-free trial period. And I mean, I didn't have to think about that. I was like, what's the maximum, what's the most I can sign up for? The fewest number of transactions is best for
Right.
and saw the community, started doing a couple of the workouts just before Christmas. And the other thing I reflected on is, this is actually the longest I've done programmed by somebody other than me,
Okay.
CrossFit in a row ever. Because, random is not varied. And so I'll pick this workout and I'll pick this workout and I'll do this one from 2012 and I'll do this one
Bill
from
program
today.
hopping.
But it was just all over the place. And so, I just kind of fell in love with the way the intro videos set you up with enough information to be safe and successful. The scaling options give me well, they give me a good challenge for my ego. Do I dare to be
Oh, man.
ridiculous or do I accept being reasonable? And if you know the primary stimulus, you have some room to dance with that. But I would have always made the wrong decision on my own and blow myself out to death today so
Mm,
that I could sort of cheerlead about how much grit I had. But then for 3 days, I can't walk around or
right.
cook a
Right.
meal.
Right. I think I think that resonates with a lot of people. And that's not, I think we've all been there and it's just not sustainable. That's just not a game you're going to be playing for 5 to 10 years. It's just one of those deals. What I'm curious with somebody like yourself, who it sounds to me like whether you're running or doing 531 or doing Linchpin, it sounds like you don't have an issue with the discipline to go move your body, or to keep the nutrition on track or whatnot. And like I said, you can just walk into the gym and do it, so you don't need potentially external motivation to make that happen.
Right.
But so for how does somebody like yourself, that, and not to categorize you as a loner, but for an oversimplification, I will. How
Yeah.
do you find the other people and like the community aspect in the Facebook group? Because it sounds like you probably don't need it. What's been your experience dipping your toe into this big pool of other people?
Well, I I love seeing people doing things that are way outside of my own current capacity.
Yeah.
Not even so much that it gives me a belief that I can get there, but phenomenal strength is phenomenal.
Oh my
Right?
goodness.
Phenomenal speed is phenomenal. It's no different than watching the Olympics on TV. I don't assume when I watch the Olympics that if I just put my mind to it, I'll gold medal next year. But seeing
Right.
seeing some guys and gals in their garage doing things that I just can't do right now, but they are getting after it by themselves, kids playing in the background, dog coming up and sniffing them while they're doing deadlifts. And on the other side, there are people who maybe don't have a history of highly complex movements,
Hmm.
but they're showing up. And
Right.
that too is inspiring to just say, if they can do it, I can do it. I'm going to do it anyway. Because I've joked with people too. There's a certain age where I think having that hour a day becomes way more about sanity than about vanity.
Yeah,
Middle-aged people kind of disappear from the radar of like who's
100%.
looking at who. Well, nobody cares, but I
Nobody
need this
cares. Nobody
for
cares.
brain chemicals as much as I do for, waist size or arm size.
I couldn't agree more. It's my
And having that
sanity. It's my
backup.
sanity check every day, like my little pressure release valve.
And the other
There's
thing is
people.
that
Oh,
you,
good.
you and the other people in the community who are humble enough to say, this is how I'm scaling today
Mm.
because this is what's a suitable, reasonable stimulus for me today. It it gives me permission to be reasonable.
Oh,
There
good.
was a video
Good.
that you posted a while ago of you doing some dumbbell stuff when I think it was a barbell thing, and it had the assault bike in there. And I'm not being critical of you when I say this. I'm being appreciative. The pace at which you were going was reasonable. It
100%.
didn't look like you were trying to induce vomiting. It didn't look like you wanted to have a headache for 4 hours after the thing. And like I said, it gave me permission to show up and do diligent work, but to just not destroy myself every day, which I mean, I do have that available and I choose it sometimes, but if I choose it every day, I'm really just not. I'll stop enjoying it. I'll stop making progress. I'll be at the doctor.
Dude, I mean, I couldn't agree more. That's the whole, there's that educational component too that we hope to put forth at Linchpin as well, like that strength and conditioning IQ or fitness IQ, because it's like I always like to try to tell people like don't be confused about it. Some of that original context remains true to this day. Like high intensity drives results. If every time you go out for a run, your goal is to run slower than you did before, it's not going to go well a year from now. If every day you deadlift, you're like, I'm going to intentionally take 5 pounds off and see how my deadlift goes. And it's not going to go well. Like intensity drives results, but how frequently you can expose yourself to a high level of intensity depends upon whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55, or 65. Because maybe you can get away with it 5 times a week at 25 or 35 years old and everything continues to progress in a good way. But at some phase in your life, trying to do that every day is eventually going to just make you under-recovered, overtrained, however you want to say it. Then you're going to show up to the gym lethargic, and then whether you realize it or not, you're going to try to slug through it, but you won't have the oomph, so your intensity goes lower. Now you've just turned into 5 mediocre workouts a week, and you're wondering why it happened that way. Instead of giving yourself the permission to, I'm going to burn it down on these 2 days, and these other days I'm going to take my foot off the gas, and now I can like have this modulation which is sustainable, and I actually still get progress. And I think all of those things together in a community aspect help people, whether they're 25 or 55 or whatever, walk into the gym and make something happen. And you're right, man. There's some people in that community. I almost posted this the other day as like kind of a joke, but also true after the hang power cleans, the eights, the fours, and the twos. I wanted to go in there and just like post in the private Facebook group in the BTW squad. Like some of you people are offensively strong, like offensively strong. Like I'm so happy that you're lifting what you are, but I'm like, I look at some of the lows and I'm like, is that your deadlift? What do you mean you're hang power cleaning that? Like that is preposterous. So it's just crazy. There's a whole lot of just beasts all around the world that no one's ever heard of. They just train quietly in their garage. They go to work and they come home. And it's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, and evidently they're all getting a lot out of what we're doing. Um,
You said you've got 5 kids. What does fitness with 5 kids look like from just a time management perspective?
one of them is a super successful launch up to Philly.
Okay.
I've got four here now, and
4 is enough in the house.
it's plenty. I mean, anything other than a 1-to-1 ratio kid to adult is borderline insanity and
Yes.
unmanageable. Um, they've always known that there's going to be a time where I just need to duck out. I think they also kind of get it that not only am I incapable of impressing anybody, but that's not the point. It's that this is just good for me, and each of them has kind of picked up on it in their own way. My oldest son, he's a very, very consistent runner, but the difference is he's fast,
Mm.
getting
Okay.
faster. My next oldest son was in the Navy for a little while, and he got his level 1 cert recently too. but he's more kind of your traditional gym bro, but he needs an hour. He needs an hour
Hmm.
with the bar and the plates and the dumbbells. My next oldest son is primarily lives in the virtual world of expert gaming and
Yeah.
just that kind of general online rowdiness.
Hmm.
And my youngest son is without much coaching or direction, he's the go find something on the internet and do it in the gym.
Oh,
And
that's
he
cool.
got a 435-pound deadlift the other day at 15 years old just because
Wow.
wanted to he just wanted to see that number. Yeah. And so
Wow,
they
that is
got
impressive.
yeah.
Could you
So
imagine being 15 and having a 435 deadlift?
I'm well when I was 15, even the concept of what most of these places would have been full of nothing but Nautilus equipment at that age.
100%. Yes, yes.
But the idea that performance even happened at gyms wasn't clear to me. Like there were bodybuilders,
Oh, that's all I did growing up.
yeah,
Yep.
but
From the Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding was all just hypertrophy with no regard for performance.
right.
It was
My
aesthetics.
son
Just,
my son and
you wanted to have the right
I
striations in your tricep. That meant it was good to go. It doesn't matter what you could
yeah,
actually do with it. Did it look like a
yeah,
beautiful horseshoe? Cool.
yeah.
Mission accomplished.
My son
Yeah.
and I were joking the other day that when I used to, I mean, this is so embarrassing. I bought Flex magazine one time at a grocery store,
I remember that.
and the cashier said, "Who is this for?"
That's awesome.
But I remember that exact one. There was some world-class guy. I don't remember who it was. It could have been one of the Menzer brothers or somebody like that. But it had a feature of them running at the beach. Like
Mm,
the picture made it look like, oh yeah, these guys are going out there and crushing some
all the
cardio.
time.
Knowing that's just and I just remember thinking even then, like, I bet this guy doesn't have 50 meters in him before he
Right.
collapses and needs medical attention.
Quite true. No,
Yeah.
quite true. Um, I'm curious, maybe as a one of our closing points. You mentioned in your email, so I assume you're okay chatting with it. I think it would probably resonate with some folks. You mentioned fitness and sobriety from a 12-step program, and I know.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just ignorant, because I have friends who have dealt with that for sure. I haven't personally, how far more common it is than uncommon, when people are willing to speak about dealing with some sort of addiction in their life or whatnot, and what they had to do to get on a better path. So what was that for you?
I mean, I grew up a fairly regular recreational drinker just because there were times that's what you did when you were in high school or college. Certainly the military has some opportunities to go pro. Um,
Opportunities to go pro is a great way to put it.
we work hard, play hard, the mentality. And but it was always just kind of a, frankly, I was too busy to be good at partying.
Mm,
Just so many deployments and 5 kids, and we moved every 2 years. But this is not hard to admit. But it is hard to accept. I had the best job at SOCOM, hands down, better than the commander and everybody else because it was just this wonderful niche of coaching some people and teaching some people and running kind of innovative acquisition programs. And it was very much an in-person thing. I mean, the whiteboard was part of what we did to solve
mm,
complex problems for, world-class operators. And COVID basically took my in-person connections away from people. It took the visibility of kind of the mission and the purpose off the table, and it sent everybody home.
mm,
And I came home, and oh, by the way, the kids have to stay home too.
mm-hmm,
And there was no longer any kind of line between daytime and nighttime. There was no line between significantly critical purpose and just mundane stuff. You go from answering an email to going on an online meeting to swapping the laundry out. It turned it into like the worst 2 year summer vacation, anybody could ever get.
mm-hmm.
And I think in the absence of meaning and connection and other people and the drive to really want to help people, um, disappearing and just going off into the ether, um, was just kind of the normal 5 o'clock thing. But as the schedule continued to be sort of uninspiring, it's not a lot
Mm.
of work we're cramming into 8 hours that we have to be available. 2 o'clock sounded better than 5 o'clock. Noon started to sound pretty good. Next thing you know, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do the grocery shopping for the day,
Hmm.
but I don't have anything better to do. And, that's the most dangerous thing you can do to a guy is give him nothing to do.
Hmm.
Um, and I really started drinking to the point where I knew it was bad. Every day I wanted to quit, but by the middle of the afternoon, I felt pretty good and changed my mind over and over and over again.
Were
And
you good at hiding it or not good at hiding it?
Uh, well, we all think we're good at hiding it, but people are a little more intuitive than we probably give them credit for. And
Mm.
they're also, most people tend to not want to bring up things like that to you for fear that they'll alienate you or insult you or I mean, I was very deliberate about hiding it, and that's one of the things that you start to really come up with new reasons to drink that are, I can't believe I behaved that way yesterday. I really want to forget about it. I don't want to address it. I don't want to take responsibility.
Ah,
And that loop turns into
round and round you go, huh?
having a six pack in your sock drawer and you're watching a movie with your children, but I need to go pee and I need to go get some popcorn and you're just really keeping
Hmm.
you're managing your medication. And at some point somebody that I really care for said, "Hey, and she was a coach, like a get your stuff together kind of coach.
Yeah.
I figured I needed that at this point because life just felt like a mess." And she said, hey Spencer, I don't really think you're being honest with me or honest with yourself about the nature of your relationship with alcohol. And I'm not going to be available to you to continue this coaching
Hmm.
if you don't go to an AA meeting tonight. And,
Night.
like most people, my initial response was kind of a no way, who do you think you are? How dare you? All of those kind of self-righteous things. But I did. And oh, by the way, it wasn't what I thought. Um, it was very uncomfortable, but for reasons that are inside of me, it had nothing to do with anybody else. But eventually it got to the point where it just seemed to be a better fit for what I was trying to accomplish than what I would accomplish on my own. Frankly, not terribly different than what I said about, having you as a coach, knowing that this community it's a macro cycle and a micro cycle, and it's very diligently laid out. That all worked for me. That you can be militaristic about something like a 12-step program. Um, and there's a sequence and it is knowable and understandable. The question to most people is, are you willing to do the work?
Hmm.
And I also kind of had that going for me, that somebody lays out a very
Right.
achievable task and gives me homework or says, we're going to meet one day a week and read together. I want to see you at a meeting at least one day a week so I can get a look at you. Call me every day and just check in. Those are doables. Those are like tangible, real world things. It is not just, hey, go home and think about it until you have it all figured out.
Right. There's a
And that
plan.
was just something I could adapt to. So, 3+ years later, I don't miss it. I don't have any fantasies about returning to the Panama Jack Club or any of that. And the other thing that a lot like this community, I've had the opportunity to help some people. And
That's
as many choose to not accept help as do, but there's real growth in being to connect with other people. With the initial basis of, I know you're suffering and I'm here to help and I don't want anything from you, to now we're peers, we're kind of battle buddies in this thing, and collectively we're keeping the door open for people who are still really stuck.
that makes a lot of sense. I think it's very well said. Usually at the end, these ask people like to give their advice for somebody like struggling to get back into fitness, but we've done enough of that. So maybe I'll wrap this up by number one saying thank you for your time and your honesty and your transparency. And number two, what would be if somebody's watching this and they're dealing with some sort of addiction and they haven't gotten onto a different path? What would be your lessons learned and recommendation to that individual?
Um, I think the simplest thing to say is give it a try. You know, find an app in your area that tells you where you could go. Um, you're really joining a team of like-minded people who just want to help. You can always walk out. And they often say, well, why would you go to a place like that? Well, it doesn't work for everybody, but it works best for most. I like the odds of works best for most
Yeah.
better than I
Yeah.
like doesn't work. And the other risk is, I've probably read more books about managing that sort of problem before I ever went than anybody. But I can't solve that kind of problem by myself. And the key to open that door is willingness. I didn't show up there with willingness, but I eventually became willing to be willing, kind of took a half step. And I would just argue that if you're suffering and you know you're suffering, there's more of that available and it gets worse.
Hmm.
Um, so taking some kind of action, there are other things, there are other ways to go about it other than a 12-step program, but most people don't die giving it a try. They die in denial
Right.
that there's a problem at all.
Well said. Well, again, Spencer, thanks, brother. Genuinely appreciate you and really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Pat. Thanks very much.
And I'll see you online and have a good day.
All right. Take care.